This episode is sponsored by Angular Dev Summit, coming September 11th through the 18th, 2017. Hi, it's Chuck from devchat.tv. I reached out to some of my friends in the Angular community to put on a completely free, no-travel conference for Ruby developers. We have speakers like Rob Wermald, Jeff Welpley, and others coming to speak about all kinds of topics in Angular. So if you're trying to learn Angular or you're trying to level up Angular, come check it out. The talks are happening throughout the day each day, and we'll have a chat available during each session. Attending the talks is free, but you need to register. Go to angulardevsummit.com. Hey everybody, and welcome to another My JS Story. This week we're going to be talking to Chris Anderson from Microsoft. Now, Chris was on episode 98 of Adventures in Angular, talking about the Azure Functions portal, and we also talked to him at Build last year, Microsoft Build, about Azure Functions. Chris, do you want to introduce yourself really quickly and just tell people a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Sure, yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm Chris Anderson from Microsoft. I work on the Azure Functions team as a program manager. In the time that I'm not, going off and doing my day job here at Microsoft, I'm also, big Node.js fan, do a lot of JavaScript stuff. Really kind of been my background. It's been, a fun adventure here at Microsoft doing various JavaScript things. It's been really fun to see how things have grown over the last few years.
Nice. Well, we kind of go back a little bit ways in this show, and we ask some questions about how you got into programming and JavaScript and things like that. So let's go ahead and dive in. How did you get into programming?
Right. So, in college, I was an aerospace engineer, actually, when I first started. And I always like to joke that I chose aerospace engineering because I was just looking through all the various engineering degrees they had, and aerospace started with A. So I just chose the first one on the list.
There you go.
I ended up getting an internship at Lockheed Martin through a college work program. It was really, really great experience. But what I ended up doing there was mainly managing a giant Excel sheet full of requirements. And what I ended up learning was Visual Basic for applications to help manage that giant Excel sheet. And in the process of learning just how Visual Basic itself worked at the time, I realized that I just really liked programming more than the actual classes I was taking at the time. So I took a summer course on Intro to C programming at my university, and it just kind of snowballed from there. I remember I finished that semester. I went to my advisor and was like, hey, I want to switch and graduate with computer science in 2 years because I'll be broke if I don't. And it was just a big rush from there. I remember I had that first year, I swapped my internship over to software instead and immediately jumped into kind of front-end JavaScript land, building a client app they had for their website. And then the real clicking moment for me was I was in a topics class at university. Uh-huh. And one of the people came up to talk about how awesome Node.js was and how it was kind of like this new thing that people were doing, that you could, write the normal JavaScript you were doing in the client, but now you could use it on the server, and all the various cool things about it being single-threaded, etc. And I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. I'll try that out. I really like JavaScript. And that kind of started just a passion for me. I never really stopped after I went home and kind of installed Node.js the first time.
So what was it, though, about programming that really got you going there? Was it, oh, I get to build cool stuff? Or was it solving hard problems? Or, what was the appeal that got you going, well, maybe aerospace isn't quite my thing?
I think for me, it was definitely that sense that it was like I had superpowers. When I was in aerospace, I learned about how everything worked. I understood the way the world worked. When I'm on a plane and I see the wings flexing outside, I understand why that's a good thing, not a bad thing. But as far as having that power to feel like I can actually create with, I have that feedback loop with programming of I'm making progress, I'm making something cool, and I really don't feel restrained in the types of scenarios I can go chase after. Whenever people ask me, should I get into programming, I'm always like, yes, because whatever else you're passionate about, whether it's writing books or biology or whatnot, you can still find ways of pushing forward in that field with, programming computer science. So it's one of those kind of universal tool sets. And that's what really clicked for me. I really love that I can basically do whatever I wanted to from here.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too. And it was funny because when I got into programming and took it seriously, there was a thing that I cared about, namely tech support at the job I was working at. And we had a specific set of problems, and it just solved it. It totally enhanced the way that we could get work done. And yeah, that was the thing that really paid off for me too. And I was a computer engineering major. I had taken a bunch of computer science classes. I'd been coding on various devices since I was in junior high, and I just didn't think it was a serious thing until then. And that's what clicked. So I totally identify with that. So somebody talked to you about Node, and you thought Node, JavaScript, cool. Had you done JavaScript before that?
Yeah, so I mean, the first real software, like, when I swapped my major, I went to then my internship program and I asked, hey, give me some real coding stuff to do. VBA is, fun, but I'd like to go work with like other software engineers. And they assigned me to a project where they needed a lot of like front end development, and I hadn't done really any JavaScript. They're like, oh, it's kind of like C. You'll figure it out. So, I just did a lot of Stack Overflowing, a lot of Googling to kind of teach myself JavaScript on the job. Really, really loved it after, a solid like 9 months of kind of grinding at it and finally learning like the best practices, learning not to pollute the global namespace, all kinds of crazy fun JavaScript things. I remember, I think 6 months down the line, I actually just started Googling what book should I read. And I think reading JavaScript, the good parts, is what really kind of solidified in my head that, hey, JavaScript is actually a really, really fun language to use. There's really a lot of fun kind of patterns that I can follow in here versus like the other language I'd been learning at the time was like Java, I think. And that was my next, higher level language. And JavaScript, it felt a lot more kind of natural and expressive to me, I remember thinking at the time. And so when, finally someone introduced NodeJS to me via that topics class we had, and I was already kind of falling in love with JavaScript, the ability to use JavaScript both on the client side and the server side, and now I was empowered to kind of do full stack before full stack was a buzzword. I really kind of just fell in love with that whole idea.
Gotcha. So yes, you get into JavaScript, you start doing work there. Was this at Microsoft or was this before Microsoft?
This is all before Microsoft. I remember, so like the college hire process for Microsoft is like your senior year or the year that you're going to, before you graduate for college. You go and apply for the college hire program. They send people onto the campus. You interview on campus. And then if they like you, they send you to the Microsoft campus and you interview there. So I was doing that whole process on the side of like starting off my other pieces that I was working at my internship at the time. And so I got hired. That was great. I didn't really know the team that I got hired into, to be honest, when I first joined. I knew it had something to do with databases, but I wasn't entirely sure what it was going to be. So I got here and it ended up being SQL Server was the team they hired me into. And it wasn't really, I had some degree of influence. I wanted to work on like developer tools. So that's kind of what they put me in. And from there, it was kind of fun because I joined there. I learned a lot about like how PowerShell and SQL works and all this kind of stuff that I didn't care about, honestly, before I joined Microsoft.
Right.
And then, I found out how powerful all that stuff was. I still really love PowerShell. It's my preferred, scripting kind of experience. I'm really glad that they're starting to move that stuff to other platforms now. And then I was like, okay, so now I'm going to push back and I'm going to try to push more Node.js on SQL. And so I remember like pushing really hard. There's a driver for SQL Server that's kind of written purely in JavaScript called Tedious. And they had problems with supporting some of the TDS 1.2 protocol stuff. And so I remember sending pull requests to them to help support that so we could go ahead and do redirects via the TDS protocol, a bunch of low-level database stuff. But I really, really loved that. And I was like, I wish I could do more of this. And so I did a internal job search. We have like something called HR Web here at Microsoft where I can just search for like a technology and find teams that want that technology. And I found the mobile services team at the time. And they needed Node.js people. So I joined that team, and that kind of snowballed into me starting on WebJobs here on the team. And then that snowballed into me starting Functions. And Functions started as an effort to make Node.js work with an existing .NET technology called WebJobs SDK.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And Functions exists because I wanted to add Node.js to a .NET product.
Nice. Yeah, I hear a lot of people compare Azure Functions these days to like AWS Lambda, or I think IBM Bluemix has a flavor of the same kind of thing. And
OpenWhisk, yeah.
Yeah, it's great stuff, and it's nice to be able to just say, okay, here's a little bit of logic, and off we go. And yeah, that's kind of it's kind of interesting just to hear this whole journey, right? And I think some people kind of have this idea about programming, and people that work at places like Microsoft or Google or Facebook that they knew they were going to do software all their life, and they've been programming since they were 4 years old, and you found it as an adult in college. Well, if you can call college kids adults, and you decided, you know what, this is great, this is fun, and you took advantage of the opportunities that were presented to you, and that's how you got where you are.
Yeah, I mean, it's been the choice to go and take the Intro to C course at my college. I look back on as being the second best choice between talking to my wife. Like, that's just been the biggest change for me. Like, I went from like going through school just because I knew I needed a job to like now this thing that I was going to do for my job was now also my hobby and passion. Mm-hmm. Like, if you fired me tomorrow, I'd still be working on some of the same things that I'm doing just out in the open source, thanks to the fact that Functions is open source.
Yeah. One other thing that I kind of want to ask about is, and this is something, so I beat the you don't have to be a programmer since you were two thing to death. I talk about it every episode of this show. But one thing that I think is interesting too is that you were in a position where you wanted to add essentially JavaScript to a .NET product. And you mentioned that you found other teams that might want it, but I mean, isn't that risky? A lot of people kind of get it in their head that, you know what, trying to, push another language into a language ecosystem that already exists, that may not be a popular move. That may be something that people want to shy back from.
Yeah, I mean, the thing for me is to just, the reason that I wanted to do it at the time is that we were looking to see how we can go ahead and increase adoption of this technology. Uh-huh. And this was totally not like a super well funded and went up through like the whole approval chain. This is just me and a dev joking around about what we could do to improve adoption. So it's totally just a hack. Like, we do a lot of these things, at least in our team, where we just start a prototype of an idea and see where it goes. And that just ended up being one of those ideas that took on a life of its own. Like, we kill 9 ideas out of 10 that we have on our team, but we always come up with new things, try new things. And it's really just about kind of having fun, thinking about what could potentially help customers, reach more customers, help make those customers more productive.
It sounds almost like you get to play at work.
Yeah, I mean, the team culture we have on our team, we feel it's unique even with inside of Microsoft sometimes. We're working in the open source, which makes things just very clean in terms of like all of our, normally like sometimes you kind of get like buffered between talking to customers. So you have like, as a developer in the team, you'll have like your PM who helps talk to customers, then you have your customers. On our team, it's almost the opposite. Sometimes I feel like our engineers talk to customers more often than I do because they spend so much time on GitHub talking to them and directly interfacing with people through GitHub issues and things like that. It's really fun. And because they're working with customers so much, because everyone on the team is working that way, we end up having a lot of crazy ideas because there's just so much interaction. It's kind of what I think people wanted from like open space concepts, where you have so much interactions between various different types of people. They end up with a whole kind of broad set of diverse ideas.
Yeah, and the way that you're describing things, I mean, I've talked to a bunch of people on like the Visual Studio Code team, and it sounds very similar to the way that they operate as far as, talking to customers, and, they throw a whole bunch of ideas against the wall and see which ones stick. And, they're just out there to create great tools for people to get stuff done. And it's a bit different from the Microsoft that I kind of grew up in my programming career hearing about, it was all closed and serious and evil and whatever. I don't know if it's a different Microsoft or if it's just they're better at communicating what they're up to, but it's been really interesting to just see how open and excited Microsoft folks are about doing cool stuff for people that are working on the web.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I kind of point to open source as that big move for us that really helped to change the way I thought about working for Microsoft. It's one of those things that not only does it empower our customers, but it makes life as a developer and person on the team better. Like it's a win-win. And I constantly push for more teams to be open source earlier, and really use that as both a tool to make your job better as an individual on the team and help your customers out.
Yep, that totally makes sense. So you said that you're a product or project manager.
Program manager.
Manager.
You can think of me as a product manager. We just like to use it. We were like I think Microsoft was one of the first companies to have that kind of product manager concept embedded in the engineering team. Uh-huh. But we did it and we called it program managers. And then we never changed the name once the rest of the industry decided to call them product managers.
All right. So what does a program manager actually do then on the team?
So for me, if you ask me what they paid me to do, it's to go through there and talk to customers, look at all the various issues we have, and basically prioritize them. Mm-hmm. That sounds really kind of boring when I say it out loud like that. But really, the way that I like to think of it is I'm doing whatever I can to basically make the product and our customers successful with our product. So, I talk to a lot of customers. I go speak at conferences. I go and build samples. I'm a fairly technical kind of PM, so it might be a little bit unusual, but I also build a lot of prototypes. So if I have an idea for a new way that the product could work, I often go out there and just, take a week or two to go off and build a prototype of an idea. And then we kind of work on it with the broader engineering team after that. So I kind of see it as like maybe product owner. I kind of feel like I'm often empowered to be kind of the entrepreneur on the team as well.
So that sounds like fun.
Yeah, it's a whole lot of fun.
I've talked to and worked with a ton of project managers, and half of them weren't technical at all. And so, if you'd asked them to explain what we actually did, and that made it hard, they just wouldn't get it. But then, the rest of them, some of them have been out of the programming game for so long, and they have no interest in actually, understanding why we're making the decisions we're making. And that also makes it hard. So it's really interesting and actually very refreshing to hear about organizations like Microsoft, where it feels like they could almost do whatever they want, going out of their way to make sure that they have people who really get it working in their teams.
Yeah, really having just a solid team is the base thing we try to do. Our team, we didn't hire our team bespoke to go work on Azure Functions, for instance. Mm-hmm. We just kind of took all the great people we had around us, and people who liked the idea kind of started partying on it with us, and it almost grew naturally to an extent. There was some push from management and stuff like that to kind of focus on it and things like that, but a lot of people really started choosing the things they wanted to work on just out of kind of love of what the things they were doing.
That makes sense. So we had you on JavaScript Jabber and we talked about Azure Functions. Does the Azure Functions team actually use Azure Functions to make Azure Functions work?
We don't actually use Azure Functions to make Azure Functions work under the covers. For the most part, it's actually built on top of the app service technology stack. So things like web apps and mobile apps. The stuff that powers that is kind of what powers functions.
That makes sense.
So all of our, for instance, the UI that you actually see, which is actually an Angular 2 application, or just Angular now. I got to get the branding in my head correctly.
I know.
Because Angular 4 is out now, so it's all Angular. So
I always correct myself when I say Angular 2. Angular 2 or 4 or later.
Yeah, now in my head, 6 months I'll be totally correct with it again. Just like we can't say Node.js V8, we have to say Node.js 8 now.
Uh-huh.
So that's all running on basically an app service web app underneath the covers, and a lot of our various engineering pieces are essentially things on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
We do use functions for a bunch of stuff within Microsoft itself, but building functions on top of functions doesn't feel entirely kosher, I guess. We haven't come up with a use case where functions would help us manage functions. We test all of our test stuff, I guess, is built on functions. We use functions to test functions.
Yeah, that would make sense. So the other episode that we've had you on, we had you and Ahmed come on Adventures in Angular and talk about the portal which you built with AngularJS. And so I'm curious, how did you and your team come to use Angular?
So I remember, I think he told this story best. It ended up being just his kind of choice. At the time, we were kind of trying to take this prototype that me and Matthew Charles had been working on at the time for what ended up becoming Azure Functions. And we wanted to come up with a portal UI for it. Mm-hmm. And so Ahmed had quite a bit of experience kind of building, front-end applications and things along those lines. And he'd been wanting to try out what at the time was called Angular 2.
And it was still in beta, if I remember right.
It might have been just in beta. It was one of those things where it was incredibly early. We all kind of looked at him are you sure that's the right choice? He's yeah, this seems like it's the best thing of the options at the time. Right. He looked at React. He looked at a couple of other ones, and he kind of decided that Angular had the right amount of stuff just out of the box for us, so we didn't have to reinvent the wheel for everything, but power and speed that we needed to have.
Right.
And he loved that it was TypeScript, which really helped because we have a lot of developers that are kind of coming from a strongly typed C# background, and TypeScript made it really easy for them to kind of play and work in that system.
So the fact that Microsoft sponsors TypeScript didn't come into that at all?
It might have. I can't read his brain, but he made the decision on his own. So there was no one coming from the TypeScript team saying you should go use Angular. In fact, we had people who were why didn't you use this thing? Because we had a Microsoft framework. And we're we just wanted to use Angular at the time. So we don't necessarily go and chase after just let's go do everything on the Microsoft stack. We tend to use we tend to build things on the things that people know on the team and that we think make the most sense kind of going forward. So like, for instance, like we're using gRPC and protobuf and like a new technology we have, which is entirely not a Microsoft technology. We're not entirely focused on the not invented here kind of thing.
No, it just seems to me, though, that, since you have people like Anders and some of the other folks that work on TypeScript, that, you could kind of get the inside track and, expert help, I guess, from Microsoft.
And that we added TypeScript support to functions, which is kind of an early preview right now. And there we did get help from the TypeScript team. So that was really helpful. But as far as like choosing what technology we built on, it might have factored into his decision-making process that we own TypeScript, but I'm pretty sure that he just tried out all the various things and ended up liking TypeScript. TypeScript was built to kind of make Microsoft devs happy and productive, right? So it kind of makes sense in my head that he would lean towards that choice.
Yeah, that makes sense. And a lot of the Angular 2 beta examples, and still a lot of the Angular examples, are done in TypeScript. So it's kind of easy to just follow along if that's the direction you're going to go.
And we ended up doing like one or two major refactorings that I'm sure they're all just like super grateful that they standardized in TypeScript early on for, and not like, plain old JS.
Yep. So how much Angular have you done then, or has it been all been Ahmed?
So Ahmed's been doing most of the portal stuff. Ahmed, and we also have like Alexi and Elliot as UX devs that party on. You can actually look at our repo and kind of see all the various people from our team who work on stuff. Since I'm a PM, I work really hard on making sure that I don't write any code that actually goes into production, just because it kind of keeps the hats on the right heads. But I'll go ahead and like write prototypes for things like that. So like I played a lot with the Monaco editor, which is a browser-based version of the VS Code editor that you can play with. Like they've got a cool playground there, and I've built a lot of prototypes of using features inside of that. But for the most part, I try not to make sure that my commits actually go to production, because I'm not there to support them, because it's not my job to provide support for software.
Right.
I have built a couple of tutorials for using functions plus Angular and stuff along those lines. I built my wedding website with Angular when that came out. So I've played with it quite a bit. I help customers who use Angular quite a bit. But I definitely haven't put it into production, because I make it a point not to push code into production, because I don't get paid to support it.
Right. No, that makes sense. So do you have any extracurricular things that you do with code when you're not working on Azure Functions?
For a long time, I did a lot of stuff of just like cool side projects. Like, I built a couple of plugins to make like Express Socket.io and the Connect middleware stuff all work well together. But, as Functions kind of taken off, it's definitely taken over more of my life and attention. I always joke that it's my baby. I've poured a lot of my blood into the product at this point. So I spent a lot of time outside. Like I wrote a Connect middleware type thing for functions-based things. So that way you can go ahead and write middleware into your functions and things like that. And it's been fun. Built a lot of just, small little like game websites that I just put up on my GitHub and then never actually followed through on. It's still one of those things that I always wish that I could just have two of me, one of me to go and chase off and be a developer full time, and one of me to keep on doing the product stuff that I like doing, because I get to see so many cool things working in the product space, like all the various fun things that our customers build and stuff like that. So I always feel like I want to just kind of switch hats independently all the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I usually ask people what they feel like they've contributed to the JavaScript and Angular community. And I think a lot of yours are probably going to be tied up around Azure Functions, but are there things in particular that you feel like you've contributed one way or another?
I mean, specifically to like Angular and like just plain old JavaScript, probably not so much. I've definitely, used a lot of Angular. We gave some feedback from our team to Angular early on as we were building the process out. But for the most part, like the things that I've done has just been like, I've made lots of tiny little pull requests to tons of JavaScript libraries and things like that. Like I helped improve TDS. I helped improve a couple of like NodeJS libraries for Azure stuff. Things along those lines. For the most part, I always feel like I'd like to be like more involved early on in those processes of like, I always I think my next dream is going to be to actually go and contribute something to the next like Node version would be something that would be fun for me. I really like seeing a lot of the community stuff they have going on in the Node development area.
Cool. I guess the last thing I'm going to ask you for is pick.
Have you ever felt like you're falling behind, or that the programming world is moving so fast that it's impossible to keep up? Then there's the issue of where to go to make sure you're up to date. The answer is to join a community dedicated to discussing the latest in JavaScript. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if you got JavaScript Jabber all day? Well, you can, kind of. We've created a Slack community for JavaScript Jabber. That means that you can connect with our listeners and guests on a platform you're most likely already using. Plus, we've set up a Keeping Current channel that pulls stories from across the web to help you know what people are talking about. And coming soon, we'll be holding monthly webinars and roundtable video chats to connect with experts in the community and with each other. So come join us at javascriptjabber.com/Slack.
And picks, you've been on the show, so you kind of get the idea. But yeah, stuff that you want to shout out about?
Yeah, so, I mean, one big thing, I thought ahead this time, because last time I was kind of a deer in the headlights. So I thought this through. I think my 3 picks are going to be Mountain Dew Pitch Black Soda. It's a limited edition Mountain Dew. They had it when I was a teenager or whatever, and I finally found it again in my local grocery store. I can't find it in any of the other grocery stores in the area, so if you see it in your grocery store, it's limited edition, and it's basically just great Mountain Dew. But as a person who really loves grape soda, but also likes caffeinated sodas, it's a great kind of mix of the two. The other thing is, I don't know if you've seen it, there's the Expanse series that's been on Sci-Fi, which is based off of the Expanse book series by James S.A. Corey. And I finally managed to find the 5th book in the series in half-price books last night. So I'm going to go finish that one off. And it's really been a great series. I hear the Sci-Fi series itself is also good, but I'm going to wait till it's all done so I can binge watch it all in one go. And I guess the other thing that I've been playing around with a lot in my various prototypes has been on Azure, we have this service called Application Insights. And I've really just been enjoying using that to basically instrument the hell out of everything. So I can have basically data for every little thing. So like functions, I can have that stuff embedded in it. My front end, like JavaScript sites, can use their front end libraries to have data through there. And so I can literally get insights into what every little part of my application is doing and exploring all the graphs that I can make from it and that kind of stuff. That's been a real delight. I've really been enjoying that.
Very cool. Well, I'm going to jump in here with a few picks of my own. The first one is there's a book series that I've been listening to on Audible again called The Wheel of Time. And
great series.
Yeah, I've been enjoying it. I tend to listen to books as I go to sleep, and I can really only do that with books that I have heard before or read before because I don't want to miss any part of the story. So I've been listening to The Eye of the World, which is the first book in the series again, and I've really been enjoying that. A few other books that I've read that I've really enjoyed as well. One is called, and I'm in the middle of this one, it's called Coolidge, and it's a biography of Calvin Coolidge, the President of the United States. And that's been kind of interesting to listen to as well. And then the other one I'm going to pick is Dog Company. And this one, if you care about how military people are treated, it's going to tick you off. But it's kind of an interesting view into the war in Afghanistan and some of the rules of engagement and how they helped or mostly hindered our armed forces over there. But anyway, really, really interesting stuff. And then I've just been playing with some tools lately, and one of them that I've been getting into and liking is Datadog. You mentioned Application Insights. Datadog is, I don't think it has nearly the features that you get off of Application Insights, but it's nice just to be able to, at a glance, see a whole bunch of information about all of the different servers I have, because I just customized the dashboard and set it up. And so I had a server that kept running out of memory, and so I set up some monitors on it, and it would let me know when there was a problem, and then I could go look and see what was going on with that thing. So anyway, also disclaimer, they're a sponsor, so not of this show, but of a different show. But anyway, that's kind of how I became aware of them, and I really like their products. So
yeah, APMs are, some of the best things you can look at investing in. Like, it's not one of those things that I always find people at it like at the end of their application, but you should actually be thinking about trying to put it in early, because you can actually use it as part of your testing cycle to get insights into various things like Datadog, New Relic, Application Insights. There's like a new thing that I keep on seeing that's like Honeycomb IO that I want to go look at as well.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. And I found that a lot of times they'll tell you this one is the worst performing one, but then they'll also tell you, but it doesn't get hit very often. And so optimizing something else is going to give you more bang for your buck. And a lot of them are intelligent enough to tell you this is probably where you want to focus your attention next to help with scaling and speed and things like that and user experience. So Loving that stuff. Well, if people want to follow you, you said you have a website or a blog, maybe GitHub or Twitter, where are you most active these days?
Yes, I mean, you can always find from me just @CrandyCodes on Twitter is the most convenient place to find all the various things that I'm doing, generally tweeting out any various projects I put out on GitHub out on there. If there's any blogs we publish for functions and stuff like that. If I'm going to a conference, that's kind of where I do most of my news.
All right, cool. Well, thank you for coming and talking to us. I'm really enjoying getting these stories from people and just, kind of seeing, hey, look, this guy, he works for Microsoft, does all this cool stuff, but he kind of came into it like the rest of us, and he's a guy that's doing awesome stuff. So,
yeah, I mean, it's been a great experience for me. I think that my story began 6 years ago now, somewhere roughly, maybe a little bit longer than that. But it's kind of weird to kind of see how I've just kind of stumbled into where I am, just kind of chasing after, having fun with programming. I think that's really what it is. If you really feel like you have a passion for programming, you're super lucky because you can use that passion to take yourself anywhere.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. Thanks again, and we will talk to everybody in a week. Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.